This is for Cameron. Cam. What is up, Mountaineer Nation? New York City Guards. What is it about a New York City Guards and Bob Huggins that just seems to mesh so well with the culture we've established here at West Virginia University? You think of people like Truck Bryant, Tariq Phillip, Jason Page, Tavon Myers, and now Jose Perez and Joe Toussaint. Could they be the next dynamic duo in a backcourt at West Virginia University? Stay tuned as I bring on guest Corey from Hawkeye of the Storm. We talk a little bit about everything today. Discuss basketball, we discuss conference realignment, we even talk about Iowa football, West Virginia football, just a little bit of everything in between. Stick around, and it's going to be a really exciting show, guys. Thanks. Or this, who other to talk to Joe Toussaint about than with Corey from Hawkeye of the Storm.
How doing, Corey? How are you?
Doing well, man. Really glad to have you on, man. Before we get started, you care to tell everybody where they can find you, where you at on Twitter, all that kind of stuff? I've got some stuff scrolling at the bottom here, but
sure. Yeah, anybody who's interested in Iowa football content, Iowa basketball, we can do some women's basketball stuff along the way, Big Ten, whatnot. At From the Hawkeye on Twitter, you can follow me, like the page on Facebook, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, and then, of course, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, and pretty much daily content. This is a busy time of year, as you know, Paul, and we'll keep trucking along with recruiting, and yeah, I mean, in West Virginia right now, they got it looks like Bobby Huggins has built a team that kind of suits his preferences, his needs. So I'm happy for Joe Toussaint. But yeah, people can, if they want to check out my stuff, certainly can do that. Much appreciated.
No problem. Yeah, for the viewers out there that aren't aware, I'm going to be moving into basketball season. We're going to be doing some Big Ten stuff anyway on here. I've got a Michigan State guy that's going to be coming on. We're going to be partnering up. So who better to talk to than Corey about Big Ten basketball? So let's get into a little bit of Joe Toussaint. Obviously, he was at Iowa for a long time. From what I was able to gather, usually in that 16 to 17 minute range, it's probably going to go a little further than that at West Virginia. I would imagine if he's the type of player that Bobby Huggins likes, he's going to play. And Bob Huggins likes defensive-minded, tough players. But I was looking at some of Toussaint's high school stuff, and he can score when he wants to. Did you see that at Iowa, any?
Well, he made a game-winning shot. Just the first thing that popped into my mind when you said that, Paul, is he made a game-winning shot against Virginia on the road last year in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, shot off the glass from mid-range. So he's got a good mid-range game. He's improved his three-point shot over the years. I'd still quantify that as his biggest hurdle. You know, can he become a consistent threat from three? But he can score. He can attack. I think he finishes well around the rim. You talked about his toughness. I think being a New York kid, it lends itself to being tough. And we're talking physically tough, mentally tough. He's a guy you want to go to battle with. Everything that I've been told and everything I've heard, he's a great teammate. And certainly you want that in your point guard. I certainly, Paul, West Virginia's depth better than I do. So I don't know how many minutes he'll get. But look, at Iowa, he just, Fran McCaffrey's a running gun offensive style guy. And
yeah,
he fit in there to an extent. But, I mean, look at guys like Jordan Bohannon. You could not have two more opposite guards than Jordan Bohannon and Joe Toussaint. One guy who's not really athletic at all, who can rain it from deep, and one guy who's uber athletic who can't shoot threes. So I think he fits better into the Bob Huggins system. I know every Iowa fan that I've ever talked to loves Joe Toussaint. And I think he's a plug and play guy. He's a veteran guard. And again, he's battle tested. He's played in a number of NCAA tournament games. So I'm happy for him. And yeah, he's going to give Bob Huggins exactly what Bob Huggins wants.
It's interesting because at times in the past for West Virginia University, we've had some really good teams go deep into the tournament. And when we've done that, we've had New York City-based Bronx and a couple times Bronx guards on the roster. It's because Bob Huggins definitely loves those tough guards. And I don't think it's a negative stigma that these kids are dealing with in New York to be labeled as tough because they're just coming out of New York. I think that's something to be proud of. And really watching some of Joe Toussaint's stuff, man, he gets up into defenders. And if he does that at West Virginia, Bob Huggins is going to play him and play him a lot. Also notice that he could rebound it for such a smaller guy at the guard spot. He's just tough all the way around. Be interested to see what he does for that backcourt.
I'll say this: so great defender, right? He's I think he's going to be a better defender with Bob Huggins, because I think Bob Huggins, no offense to Fran McCaffrey, I love Fran. Bob Huggins teaches defense, and I think Joe Toussaint lived off of his natural ability and what he was taught at a young age. And again, that's not taking a shot at Iowa's coaching staff, but defense is just not the priority at Iowa. It's not the case at West Virginia, as you know. So I think he's going to be a better defender than he showed at Iowa, which is that's a interesting prospect. I'll say this. I've never seen, I said the same thing to our friend Kuz over at Kuz's Corner when we talked months ago. I don't remember a guard that gets away with traveling as much as Joe Toussaint gets away with traveling. The guy, you're going to notice it, Paul. The guy, and maybe he's improved this, and he doesn't get called for many travels. He does occasionally. His turnover numbers have went down as he's gotten older. The dude has a hard time establishing a pivot foot and then staying set on that pivot foot. I've just never seen a Division I guard struggle with that. But you watch him, he just kind of he almost has a football body, and he kind of has a football way of running. I think it'd be kind of an intriguing prospect to put on the football field at running back. But that's beside the point. He's going to give you toughness. He's going to give you physicality. And yes, defense is the big thing. And look, he was being recruited, following the transfer portal. He was being recruited by a ton of major schools. I think
Everybody.
Johns was after him. I think there were a couple other Big 12 schools that reached out. So he had opportunities to go a lot of different places, and he made a great decision in style with Bob.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You think about Iowa, you think about West Virginia. I would say two similar schools when you look at the type of recruits they're going to bring in. These aren't programs that get major five-star players year in and year out, and they have to recruit a different way. And it's interesting to see how Bob and Fran have both done things a little differently.
True. And I don't know the last time these two teams have played. I mean, I really don't remember in my lifetime them playing. They maybe have at some point, but I'm guessing that Fran McCaffrey has a lot of respect for Bob Huggins. And look, I mean, Bob Huggins has been around the game long enough to know talent when he sees it. And I don't believe there was any bad blood between Joe Toussaint and Fran McCaffrey. There was a rumor out there, Paul, that Joe Toussaint went into Fran's office and requested 30 minutes a game. And Fran basically said, I can't guarantee you that. Iowa's got a freshman, 4-star freshman, Desante Bowen, coming in at point guard. They return Aaron Eulis, the younger brother of former Kentucky star Tyler Eulis. And then they have Tony Perkins, who's been playing some one, and I think he'll play more one as the season goes on. So it made sense for Joe to explore options. And that's the great thing about the portal. Everybody wants to talk about the negative with the transfer portal and how it's free agency and NIL is dominating it. I don't know if NIL played into it. You think Bob Huggins threw a bunch of money at Joe Toussaint? I don't. Now maybe there are some incentives there. I hope there are for his sake. I mean, I think he deserves that, making a big move, and he's dedicated himself to basketball for how many years now. So I hope he is being able to benefit off his name, image, and likeness. But I think this is a great thing about the transfer portal. A kid like this who's earned his way, never gotten into any trouble that I'm aware of off the court. And now he's going to have an opportunity, kind of like C.J. Frederick, although C.J. Frederick is not viewed very highly in the Iowa realm because of how he left, when he left. Not the case with Joe Toussaint. Both those guys are going to have an opportunity to make their marks down south, but certainly with Joe, I think, again, just playing style, everything about what he brings to West Virginia, I think Mountaineer fans are going to love him.
In a day and age when pleasantries are probably the last thing somebody considers when leaving a school, Joe Toussaint seemingly leaving Iowa the right way. That's nice to hear. We're certainly glad to have him. But you mentioned a few players from the Hawkeyes. What's the outlook on the Hawkeyes this year? Usually a contending team in the Big Ten, and even nationally, you guys are being talked about.
It's a great question. I mean, you lose Keegan Murray, who's right now, I mean, I know we're just a few games into the NBA season. He might be rookie of the year when all is said and done.
He might be rookie of the year.
It's incredible what he has done, and people forget on the outside that he was a no-star, maybe a two-star recruit coming out of high school. Well, actually, let's say this. He actually went to DME Academy, so he reclassified, took a year to develop at DME down in Florida, and had reportedly had one Division I offer out of high school, and that was Western Illinois. And the twins, of course, his identical twin, Chris, both sons of former Iowa star Kenyon Murray, they wanted to play together. And that's the one storyline with Iowa this year, Paul. How will Chris, for me, and I didn't even add this, I published some content yesterday about my top storylines. This was not one of my top storylines, but it's a major storyline. How will Chris play without his brother? Because I venture to say that those two haven't played without each other since they were maybe never. I don't think they've ever played without each other. So that's going to be interesting. But Iowa has had this knack, and give Fran credit, identifying talent, developing talent. You talk about Luka Garza. You talk about Joe Toussaint or Keegan Murray. I think Jared Utoff was an All-American. Chris Murray's got an opportunity to step into those shoes that his brother leaves behind. Patrick McCaffrey is an unorthodox type player. Defense is always the big question mark with Fran's teams. They have improved over the past couple of years, but the numbers say, Paul, if you want to make a run to a Final Four, you have to have a top 50 defense at a minimum. And if you look at Ken Pom and his numbers, Iowa has been well outside the top 50 over the past 5 years. I think last year their defensive efficiency, according to Ken Pom, was somewhere in the range of 75. So that's still got to get better. But Iowa fans would tell you, hey, let's talk about a Sweet 16 before we talk about a Final Four. They got to get over that hurdle. That's the biggest thing right now. The monkey on Fran's back is the inability to get to the second weekend. And they've won plenty of first-round games. Last year they get upset by Richmond in the first round of the tournament. But they beat Cincinnati in 2019 and then lost to Tennessee. And they beat Davidson one year in the first round. They beat Temple one year. They've got to figure out a way to get to that round of 16 because that's what people care about. NCAA basketball fans care about the tournament. And it's unfair to Fran at times, I believe. Heck, they won the Big Ten tournament last year. And I had somebody on my channel this morning, and I try to read every comment on my channel. Somebody said, nobody cares about the Big Ten tournament, win in the NCAAs. I disagree with that, but that's where a lot of fans are. So unless Iowa can get to that tournament and win in a one-and-done style format, there are going to be restless fans.
Interesting. And it's I just keep going back to the correlation. I don't know if you feel like I do, but I feel like Iowa and West Virginia are just so similar universities. Obviously, there's some differences there, but if you just look at it, West Virginia's football school, Iowa's probably would call themselves a football school, but they also have successful basketball schools, successful basketball coaches. They recruit in a similar way. Just a lot of correlations. I would love to play Iowa. I wish they would be on the schedule at some point in time. Unfortunately, Director Shane Lyons is probably not going to put somebody like Iowa. I don't see really – we don't really play the Big Ten. It's usually the Big 12 SEC challenge. The Big Ten usually – I don't even know who you guys play in your challenges.
We get the ACC and you get the Big East, and not every Big Ten team gets to play in the Big East because how many teams are in the Big East? There's 16 teams in the Big East. I can't keep track how many teams now. So Iowa does play in that challenge. They play Seton Hall this year, but I mean, you have the early season tournaments. Iowa this year goes down to, was it Niceville, whatever how you pronounce that, down the Panhandle to play a tournament. So yeah, it's weird that they haven't met each other. But I'm guessing these are probably, I mean, right now I would predict that Iowa makes the tournament. I don't know where you see West Virginia fitting into the mix, but there's always a chance they meet in March.
Yeah, well, it's weird that you say that. Even after Joe Toussaint came and all the transfers, I mean, obviously Bob Huggins was very active in the transfer portal this past year, grabbing a Trey Mitchell, grabbing a Muhammad Wagay, grabbing a Jimmy Bell, grabbing a Toussaint, grabbing an Eric Stevenson from South Carolina who fits the mold under a guy, Frank Martin, who's no longer there. He went out and got his guys. You said it in the beginning. Preseason ninth. That's what they expected us to be. I don't know how much a Manhattan player that averaged 18 points a game in the MAAC coming in. He was the preseason player of the year. So obviously he's a really good player, but the Big 12, we've seen it before. We've seen good players come into the Big 12 before, and it's a wood chipper. You're not used to the physicality, not used to the style of play. It's a different world. So I don't know how much that guy makes the difference. But a lot of us West Virginia fans that can look at this logically are still pretty bullish on the Mountaineers this year. I feel like ninth for any Bob Huggins team is just too low. Considering what he did with last year's team when he was able to get 16, 17 wins out of that team, amazing. Because that was one of the worst teams we've fielded. From the outside looking in, do you have any opinions on the Mountaineers?
Well, again, you know the roster better than I do, Paul, but based on what you just told me, and Trey Mitchell's a guy Iowa wanted, by the way. I mean, Iowa went after Trey Mitchell as well. So I would have to think that you take the over. If the over under on positioning in the Big 12 is 9, I'm taking the over on that. The transfer portal, regardless of what, and I know West Virginia, they weren't a great basketball team last year, right? They went through some issues. I mean,
transition.
Okay, so. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not up to what Mountaineer fans want, but the transfer portal, you need to think about the transfer portal is you have the opportunity, even though some people don't like it, especially with basketball, you have the opportunity to really rebuild things quickly. I mean, I bring up in football the example of what Brett Bielema is doing right now at Illinois. He had a lot of attrition last year in the transfer portal, but guess what? He also went to the portal, and all of a sudden, Illinois looks like the best team in the West. And granted, part of that is because Iowa's down, Wisconsin's down. But, it's amazing you can do that in football. You absolutely can do it in basketball. We're seeing teams all across the country doing that. I mean, Fred Hoiberg got the ball rolling up here in Ames before the portal became a thing. So I do believe that it's possible that, you bring in guys like Mitchell and Toussaint and the kid from Manhattan, which I believe the kid from Manhattan has to sit out until the second semester. Am I correct?
He does. Yeah. Still January.
Yeah. But again, you get him back in conference play and he sounds like he's a veteran, a guy who can score. From the outside looking in, I would be thrilled if I'm a Mountaineer fan with what Huggins has done, because Huggins isn't like people who think that older coaches can adjust to the times.
Right.
I just think that's ridiculous, especially when you look at a guy like Huggins who's been around forever and he's used the portal more than just about anybody out there. So I would be happy with his efforts in finding a way to make this team competitive this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make the tournament.
Yeah, and he did what he could, considering, I mean, you can't stop players leaving, but you can sure as heck control who comes in. And, it's funny, Bob was on record saying he didn't like the portal. And then after all these big-time players transferred in the press conference a few months ago, he said, I kind of like it now.
Exactly.
Bob, he's something else in those press conferences. Belichickian is what we like to call it, similar. So before you jump off here, if there's still anybody around, tell them where you can find you at.
Yeah, from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, from the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. The Facebook page is a disaster. I've talked about that. I'm open about that. I need to do better promoting Facebook. But at From the Hawkeye on Twitter, you can follow me, become a premium subscriber on our YouTube channel. We've got post-game coverage for all the men's basketball games, post-game coverage with former Iowa assistant coach John Patterson, who's offensive coordinator under Hayden Fry in the 90s. And then with basketball, we've got Gary Close, who was a coach with Dr. Tom Davis back in the 80s and 90s. So great content on the way, and recruiting, whatever the case may be, you can find it. And if you don't want to become a premium subscriber, at least hit the subscribe button and be a part of the fun for the next, we still got, it's October 31st. We got basketball until at least mid-March. And as you said earlier, it's football, basketball, they don't slow down. We got recruiting all year long. So it's
all year long, baby.
Great content on the way.
All right, guys. Well, that's where you can find Corey at. This has been Mountaineer Paul Talks Football and Basketball and Conference Alignment and everything in between. If you haven't liked the video, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to Mountaineer Paul Talks Football, we've grown almost 300 subscribers in 3 weeks. We'd like to go a little further, so give us a subscribe if you haven't already. We really appreciate you guys for watching. This has been a great show. Mountaineer Paul is out.
This is for Cameron. Kim.